During her time as mayor, Tiffany Henyard lived like royalty, spending public funds on expensive vacations, security, and other extravagant expenditures. She also reportedly borrowed millions of dollars using the city's infrastructure as collateral. Tiffany Henyard recently made public claims about being broke after hitting rock bottom, even admitting to relying on regular people for money to maintain an extravagant lifestyle she once enjoyed. This is a stark reversal, and the consequences of her financial mismanagement are only now starting to unfold. In essence, Henyard turned the city's coffers into her personal piggy bank when she openly acknowledged that she had a blank check in the city and wasn't scared to use it. Her choice to spend about $1 million on a welcome sign for Dalton at a time when the town was experiencing growing financial difficulties is among the most egregious instances of her financial excess. Tiffany Henyard's financial troubles did not end with the misuse of public funds. Reports also showed that she borrowed millions of dollars and used city assets as collateral. The people of Dalton were struggling to make ends meet, but Henyard's actions demonstrated extreme irresponsibility. In addition to these vanity projects, she also enjoyed the luxury of a security detail, which cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Some of the officers were reportedly earning nearly $133,000 in overtime, more than many people in Dalton earn in a number of years. When it became apparent that the city was unable to meet its financial obligations, the extent of her spending and borrowing started to catch up with her. Police cars were in danger of being repossessed, and the fire department had not had a contract in 5 years. In addition to her poor management of the city's finances, Henyard was involved in a Section 8 housing scandal, which involved her continuing to fund her extravagant lifestyle. Henyard allegedly used a program intended to help low-income individuals and families find affordable housing, but she allegedly used it for her own personal gain. She allegedly owned properties that were in terrible condition, full of mold, water damage, and other problems, and she continued to collect Section 8 payments despite the fact that the properties were deemed uninhabitable as of November 2019. However, the situation worsened when it was revealed that despite the appalling conditions of the properties she owned, Tiffany Henyard kept cashing Section 8 checks and allowed them to deteriorate. This egregious negligence prompted further accusations of corruption because Henyard was forced to use government funds intended for those in need while low-income tenants lived in moldy damage. When the FBI started looking into her activities, they conducted a thorough investigation into her personal financial transactions in the town's finances, including the misuse of public funds. This was because Mayor Tiffany Henyard was not only accountable for misusing public funds, but also for creating a culture of corruption. Apartments Henyard enjoyed a life of luxury funded by taxpayers. Once the mayor of Dalton, Tiffany Henyard soon found herself at the focus of an investigation that would reveal the entire scope of her financial misconduct. The FBI's investigation, which included subpoenaing documents from Tiffany's personal accounts and the town's finances, showed that Henyard was using public funds for personal advantages, such as paying for an expensive security detail, lavish vacations, and other personal expenditures. The extravagant. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Henyard's activities were far more serious than initially believed, adding gasoline to the fire. The lifestyle Henyard had enjoyed while serving as mayor was paid for with funds that should have been used for the welfare of Dalton residents. As the investigation progressed, Tiffany's reputation started to deteriorate. According to reports, former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot was brought in to oversee the investigation, sending a strong message about the seriousness of the case. The FBI's use of electronic surveillance showed that they were closely monitoring Henyard and gathering information from a variety of sources, including local businesses and former employees who had knowledge of Henyard's alleged wrongdoings. At this point, Tiffany Henyard's public behavior became even more erratic. Instead of facing the mounting pressure and addressing the allegations, Henyard chose to disappear. She stopped attending public meetings and avoided making appearances, including missing more than 25 board meetings. It seemed as though she thought she could avoid the consequences by hiding away, but her absence only fueled public frustration. The people of Dalton, who had once trusted her to lead them, were now demanding answers. They were angry about the misuse of public funds and the lack of accountability that had allowed Henyard to spend taxpayer money with such disregard. In an attempt to deflect blame, Henyard began accusing her former chief Keith Freeman of poor financial decisions, as though she had nothing to do with the financial disaster unfolding around her. This shift in blame only served to further alienate her from the people of Dalton, who were beginning to realize that they had been misled by someone they had trusted to manage the town's finances. As Henyard continued to hide from the public eye, the FBI's investigation pressed. The evidence against her grew, and the legal consequences of her actions seemed inevitable. As more interviews were conducted with local business owners and former employees, it became clear that Hen's misconduct extended far beyond a few isolated incidents. The FBI was determined to expose the full scope of her corruption. While Tiffany may have hoped to avoid the consequences by disappearing, her problems only grew more significant. As the investigation continued, the people of Dalton had lost faith in her leadership, and the town was in a state of disarray. The FBI, which is currently keeping a close eye on Henyard, was determined to find all of the fraud and financial mismanagement she had engaged in while serving as mayor. The inquiry turned up more than simply financial misconduct. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Tiffany Henyard continued to act as though nothing was wrong, and further distanced herself from the very people she was supposed to serve. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that Henyard's actions would not go unpunished. Henyard was accused of multiple acts of fraud, including misusing Section 8 housing funds and taking advantage of government programs intended for the most vulnerable members of society. The FBI's attempts to expose the entire scope of her corruption indicated that legal action was imminent and the Tiffany Henyard House of Cards would eventually fail, leaving her to deal with the fallout from her deeds. Tiffany Henyard's story of greed, neglect, and financial recklessness makes it obvious that her time as mayor was over. What began as a public service position swiftly turned into a chance for personal gain, and now that the FBI is closing in on her, her once thriving political career has been overshadowed by the weight of her own wrongdoings, while the residents of Dalton wait for justice. The consequences of Henyard's actions are just now becoming completely apparent. Her legacy as mayor will be permanently tarnished by financial mismanagement, corruption, and a total lack of concern for the community she was meant to represent. The former mayor of Dalton, Tiffany Henyard, is currently making headlines for all the wrong reasons, and it's safe to assume that her fast-paced lifestyle is catching up with her. While Tiffany appears to be getting deeper into financial trouble, the town of Dalton is collapsing even more quickly, with millions of dollars in debt and no mayor in sight. She has been selling personal items like "There's no tomorrow" and "Struggling to make ends meet." A temporary mayor, Jason House, was selected by the Dalton Village Board when they became dissatisfied with Tiffany's disappearance. That's correct. Dalton had to bring in a stand-in since the actual mayor didn't bother to show up. It's almost as if they elected a magician whose last trick was to disappear right when they needed her most. Managing a town isn't a game. It's about facing your problems head-on. Tiffany seemed to forget that while Dalton was left without leadership, she was nowhere to be found playing game of Where's Waldo with her supporters. Tiffany's situation was dire, and when the town was drowning in debt due to her reckless spending, the town was left wondering how they ended up with a mayor who was more interested in avoiding responsibility than dealing with the fallout from her actions. Tiffany chose to run away rather than deal with the mess she had made, acting as if overseeing Dalton was somehow beneath her. In addition to being an indication of negligence, Tiffany's disappearance also showed her unwillingness to accept responsibility for her actions. The more she concealed herself from the public, the more people began to wonder if she was really this careless. The fact that she abandoned the residents of Dalton during their most vulnerable moment demonstrated that she was unfit to serve as mayor. But Tiffany's antics didn't stop there. She was also busy attempting to place the blame on her former chief of staff, Keith Freeman. In an attempt to persuade everyone that she was merely a puppet with Freeman pulling the strings, she reportedly began to blame Freeman for the financial mismanagement that ultimately led to her demise. This was a typical case of "not my fault." But in actuality, Tiffany ruled Dalton with an iron fist, and it was absurd to think that Freeman was in charge of all the choices. Tiffany continued to play the blame game. According to accounts, Freeman had fired staff members for refusing to keep data secret from the public and forced them to participate in dubious activities. Former HR manager claimed that she had been let go because she refused to follow orders to hide information. Meanwhile, other employees were report-reply pushed out when they declined to take part in shady activities Tiffany seemed to be running. The town like it was her personal from punishing anyone who didn't comply with her demands. But the most shocking claims came from business owners who reported being harassed by the police for not supporting Tiffany, one local businessman, Lawrence. Gardner said that after refusing to participate in one of Tiffany's schemes, his business license was canceled and he was subjected to police harassment. It became clear that Tiffany wasn't just mismanaging funds, she was also using her power to intimidate and punish anyone who stood in her way. The financial problems in Dalton didn't just stem from reckless spending, they were exacerbated by Tiffany's borrowing habits. It was reported that she used city infrastructure as collateral to borrow millions of dollars, which is not only absurd but also illegal. City property isn't hers to use as leverage for personal loans, yet Tiffany seemed to think that the rules didn't apply to her. Now creditors are coming after the town in an attempt to recover. The money they loaned to Tiffany, some are even looking to take possession of city property to settle the debts. The full scope of Tiffany's financial mishandling has now been revealed by the FBI's investigation. According to reports, Tiffany is still living in luxury and is still trying to hide the truth, which makes things worse. Meanwhile, Keith Freeman, whom Tiffany attempted to put under the bus, is allegedly collaborating with the authorities and supplying important information. Tiffany is now using the internet to beg for money. Yes, you read correctly. She is urging common people to open their wallets and donate to her cause, even though she spent public monies like confetti while she was mayor. This is the same woman who squandered millions on extravagant vacations. Despite her high levels of insecurity and needless vanity projects, she is now requesting handouts. The irony is nearly unbearable. Many people are appalled by Tiffany's GoFundMe page, wondering how she went from living like a Kardashian to begging for money from regular people. Wasn't she the one who had a blank check from the city? Now that she's acting like she's broke and begging for money to pay for her $119,000 welcome banners and trips to Vegas, the public is not impressed and many are making fun of her for her foolishness. How could she expect people to support her after everything she's done? Some are wondering if this is a genuine GoFundMe page or if it's just another one of Tiffany's schemes, only a means for her to obtain money before she vanishes once more. Although Tiffany's supporters may be holding out hope that she can change things, most people are beginning to see through her rules because she went from living a luxurious lifestyle to barely making ends meet online, and it doesn't make sense. People are beginning to question whether Tiffany is merely trying to pay off her debts or if this is part of a larger scheme to defraud more people of their hard-earned money. This is because of her history of dishonesty. Residents of Dalton, on the other hand, are finding it difficult to comprehend what is going on. The police department's vehicles could be repossessed, and the fire department hasn't had a contract in years. Despite all of the chaos she has created, Tiffany seems to believe that she can simply request a makeover, but in reality, she has left Dalton in a financial mess that will take years to resolve. While Tiffany is out here, her creditors are pursuing. Her and Dalton's constituents are still coping with the fallout from her rule. Making money online, her poor leadership is causing the town to collapse. Some of Tiffany's detractors think she's attempting to play the victim and garner sympathy money in the hopes that people will forget about her terrible tenure as mayor. But the people of Dalton won't let her get away with it so easily. They're going to hold her accountable for the mess she made. The most ridiculous aspect of all of this is that, in spite of everything she has done, Tiffany has raised roughly $155,000 through a GoFundMe page. It's difficult to comprehend how she is doing this, but it's evident that she has a way of persuading people to donate money to her. Some people think she is using her status as a black woman to make people feel sorry for her, but in reality, she doesn't deserve any sympathy because she has spent millions of dollars from the town on herself and is now requesting more. Henyard, Tiffany Fall. It's time for Tiffany to face the consequences of her actions, and it's obvious that she won't get away with it. The town of Dalton deserves better, and Tiffany's time as mayor has come to an end. Grace has been nothing short of dramatic. After living a life of luxury, she is now struggling to stay afloat and begging for money online, while the town she usually lives in continues to suffer. The people of Dalton aren't buying her story and won't let her get away with it. We appreciate you viewing Celebrity News.